Night had fallen across the metropolis, painting the skyscrapers in kaleidoscopes of neon lights. A hush settled over the city's busy streets. But the hush was only on the surface. Beneath it flickered a pulse of magical energy, humming with untapped power. Flickering lamplights cast elongated shadows across the sidewalks. Beneath their soft glow, a lone figure hurried through the labyrinth of downtown alleys, her breath ragged from hours of running. She wore black boots worn at the heel and a satchel strapped around her shoulder, bursting with arcane tones and half-written scrolls. Her name was Myra, a runaway apprentice from the coven of Ares Path. Enough was enough. No more forced incantations. No more subservience. No more silent acceptance of the leader's plans for the city's secret magical underbelly. Tonight, she would forge a rebellion like the great town witches of old. Only this time, the instruments of her uprising would be the unassuming traffic signs that dotted the streets. Myra paused when she reached a deserted intersection. 4 traffic lights flashed at the corner, shifting from green to amber to red. She clutched a small, leather-bound volume to her chest. A book that held the key to harnessing magic in man-made structures. The text was strictly forbidden for novices to handle, let alone read. But Myra had snagged it from the coven's archives during her escape. As she approached the sign at the corner, a simple red stop sign. She whispered an incantation she'd practiced late at night in the windowless stone halls of the coven's stronghold. Magic trickled through her fingers, forming runes in the air. In an instant, the sign's reflective surface shimmered with an unearthly light, and the steel pole quivered like a living limb. Myra took a step back, breath caught in her throat as the sign seemed to come alive before her eyes. She'd heard rumors about the existence of such enchantments, but no official rule books confirmed them. Perhaps they were relics from a time when witches roamed openly, or a half-whispered secret that only the most brash acolytes dared to believe. Yet here it was, a living sign that responded to Myra's whispered pleas for help. The stop sign tilted its edges, as if meeting her gaze. She could feel a subtle intelligence awakening behind that glossy red face, waiting for instructions. Myra swallowed, aware of how critical this moment was. If she directed the sign incorrectly, it would just stand there in confusion until the magic fizzled out. But if Myra's intentions were clear, if she could muster the rebellious spirit gathering in her heart, then perhaps this newly formed guardian would protect her from the coven's wrath. She clenched her fists, feeling that old mixture of fear and excitement swirl in the pit of her stomach. "Follow me," Myra murmured, her voice echoing in the dimly lit street. The sign didn't speak, at least not in words. Instead, it responded with a faint hum, turning on its axis to face the direction Myra walked. Its reflective surface caught the glow of a passing car's headlights. Myra felt an involuntary shiver course down her spine. This was more than a simple illusion or a meager display of power. This was a bending of the city's architecture to her will. With an excited gulp, she led the sign deeper into the labyrinth of back streets, weaving between shuttered storefronts and neon-lit convenience stores. She needed to gather more guardians, an army of metal and paint, to stand against the coven's enforcers. Her heart hammered in her chest. She might be the only witch in history who dared raise an entire city's traffic infrastructure to her cause. Yet her memories of the coven refused to remain silent. She recalled nights spent memorizing endless lines of incantations, her powers tested under the scrutiny of the High Matriarch. Each time Myra faltered, she'd feel a crackle of punishing magic or a condescending remark that chipped away at her self-worth. Over time, the coven's narrow vision smothered Myra's creativity. They used her talents for their own clandestine projects. Banknotes that never burned, illusions to distract city officials, stealth spells to secure illegal shipments of arcane artifacts. But Myra needed more from magic than secrecy and corruption. She believed witches could use their gifts to improve life, not hoard it for personal gain. That conviction had led to heated arguments, culminating in her decision to flee. And now the coven was hunting her, no doubt unleashing their best trackers to drag her back to the stronghold's dungeons. They would want the stolen tome, and they would want her silenced. At the next intersection, a five-way junction riddled with blinking yellow lights and no crosswalk, Myra worked quickly. Flipping to a dog-eared page in the forbidden text, she recited the runes to awaken 4 more signs. The vibrant, reflective arrows began to swivel, the black letters popping against reflective backgrounds. One sign, a big yellow crossroad alert, stuttered to life, while another, a single arrow pointing to the left, started spinning in circles as though testing its newfound freedom. Soon she had 5 signs in total, each one emanating a quiet energy that radiated through the asphalt. People in passing cars stared out their windows, but no one stopped. It was late, and the occasional onlooker probably chalked it up to a trick of the light or some new interactive art installation. Myra commanded them to follow her, and they complied, pivoting on their poles or bouncing along on stubby metal legs. They marched on into the night, forging a clandestine parade of metal guardians under the flickering glow of city lamps. A shrill whistle split the hush of the night. Myra froze, pressing herself against the crumbling brick wall of an abandoned factory. The traffic signs halted behind her, their poles bristling in silent vigilance. From around the corner emerged a figure clad in dark robes trimmed with silver runes, the uniform of a coven enforcer. Myra's pulse raced. She knew they'd come for her, but not this soon. The enforcer's eyes glinted with a predatory gleam. She could sense the flicker of a detection spell weaving around him, scanning the streets for traces of forbidden magic. Myra's breath caught when she spotted the enforcer's left hand, where an orb of swirling energy congealed. She recognized the technique. It was a capture spell, potent enough to immobilize even a strong mage. If she were caught, the coven's punishment would be severe and swift. Swallowing her fear, Myra gestured subtly towards her new guardians. The stop sign advanced first, metal pole gliding noiselessly across shattered pavement. It slammed itself in front of the enforcer, brandishing its red face like a shield. Before the enforcer could react, the crossroad alert sign hopped forward, its edges morphing into jagged blade-like angles. The enforcer hissed, conjuring a blast of raw energy. Myra clenched her fists, chanting rapidly. She willed the arrow signs to move in unison, spinning around the enforcer like a tornado of metal. The panic flashed in the enforcer's eyes. He had likely never seen magic perform like this. Random pieces of city infrastructure turned sentient and combative. Distracted, he unleashed the capture spell in a wild arc. The magical net spanned the street, crackling ominously, but Myra ducked behind the stop sign. With a resounding clang, the net collided with the sign, causing a spray of sparks. Yet the sign did not crumble. Instead, it seemed to ripple, absorbing the blow. Seizing the moment, Myra bellowed a single, resolute phrase. "Block him!" The signs clattered forward. Their reflective surfaces glowed with arcs of Myra's magic, and they joined together in a makeshift barrier. With his aim cramped by the swirling metal, the enforcer was forced to retreat. He executed a backward leap, stumbling as he tried to maintain balance in his billowing robes. Myra took a deep breath, focusing for a final incantation she'd read only once. She weaved her fingers in the shape of ancient glyphs, calling upon the city itself to lend her strength. The asphalt trembled, street lamps flickered. The enforcer gasped. With a burst of luminous rays, the signs converged, forging a tight cage around him, the steel posts crossing and hooking until the enforcer was effectively pinned. He roared in anger, the orb in his hand sputtering out. Unable to free himself, he glared at Myra with hatred burning in his eyes. She could only feel relief. This single victory was small, but it meant everything. Knowing more enforcers would arrive soon, Myra fled. The signs scurried after her, some bounding in great leaps, others hobbling on imaginary legs of steel. With no plan other than to escape the downtown district, she headed for the eastern edge of the city, where old highways and underpasses sprawled in a network of concrete and rust. Neon signs gave way to a patchwork of graffiti and cracked asphalt. She needed a hidden vantage point, a place to rally and expand her small army. While weaving deeper into the industrial zone, Myra recalled tales of an abandoned parking structure rumored to be a nexus of ley lines. If she could reach that place, her incantations might gain extra potency. With her rebellious adrenaline still flowing, she guided her living signs along deserted roads, contending with the occasional startled pedestrian or a curious stray cat. She trusted her sense of direction, honed by midnight escapades back at the coven, to lead her to this rumored location. Once she found the parking structure, it was everything she expected. Towering, with 4 crumbling levels of cracked concrete pillars and half-lit floodlights. Faded murals from decades past shaded the walls. Sprawling graffiti turned the place into a kind of urban gallery. Broken glass littered the ground, and the air smelled of old oil and damp mold. Perfectly deserted, Myra exhaled a shaky breath and surveyed the space. A faint tingle at the base of her skull told her she was close to a powerful confluence of magical energy. Even the simplest incantations here would be amplified. She circled the perimeter, running her hands along the cool concrete walls. The traffic signs fanned out, scanning the corners in their odd, silent manner. Sensing no immediate threat, Myra opened the tome once more, flipping through pages to discover spells that could bring more intricate life to inanimate objects. Perhaps the dozens of signs that dotted highways just beyond the city center, or the crosswalk signals that remained dormant in the gloom. She needed all the help she could get. She had barely begun her preparations when she felt another prickle of alarm. Footsteps echoed within the structure, growing louder with each passing second. Had the enforcers tracked her so quickly? Myra gathered her signs close, forming a defensive ring. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, raising a hand in caution. "Wait!" the voice called, resonant and warm. Myra's heart thundered, but she hesitated. The newcomer, stepping into the dim light, was a young woman, perhaps a few years older than Myra. She wore no coven robes, only a patchwork jacket and threadbare jeans. Yet her expression glowed with a soft luminescence that suggested magical gifts. "I'm not with the coven," the stranger said. "I've been watching you. My name is Suzette." Myra blinked, glancing warily at the flicker of power in Suzette's eyes. The fear of betrayal gnawed at her, but something about the woman's presence spoke of understanding rather than threat. "You live out here?" Myra asked, stumbling over her words. Suzette nodded, stepping carefully over a pile of broken concrete. "Let's just say I left the coven's path a long time ago." Relief warred with suspicion inside Myra's mind, but she sensed sincerity in Suzette's aura. She had that subtle radiance that often indicated a witch who had balanced her powers for good rather than ill gain. After a tense moment, Myra lowered her guard. She introduced herself swiftly, confirming that she'd stolen a forbidden tome and was raising traffic signs as an act of rebellion. Suzette listened intently, eyebrows quirked in obvious curiosity. "I know the High Matriarch," Suzette revealed softly. "She'll do anything to drag you back, even if it means unleashing destructive forces on this city." Myra nodded, thinking of the enforcer she'd just trapped. "We need a plan," she whispered, throat dry. Her gaze drifted to the overshadowed city beyond the structure's entrance. "There's a lot more to do. I can't let them continue controlling magic for their own gains." Suzette gestured to Myra's awakened signs, an admiring smile curving her lips. "You're thinking bigger, aren't you? You want to animate them all." For the next hour, the two witches hovered over the forbidden tome, scanning diagrams of runic shapes meant to imbue inorganic objects with lifelike qualities. Suzette offered pointers, gleaned from her own experiences dabbling in lesser-known enchantments. Meanwhile, Myra refined her incantations, searching for a more stable, less volatile means of animation. Together, they performed a preliminary ritual in the center of the parking structure, chalking elaborate glyphs across the scratched concrete floor, their voices weaving ancient syllables into a melodic chant. Waves of power rippled through the dusty air, swirling around them in shimmering motes of light. The traffic signs Myra had already awakened stood guard in a wide ring, their surfaces gleaming with a golden hue. Finally, golden arcs of magic burst from the runes, arcing across the city in invisible lines, searching for latent signposts. Myra and Suzette hoped that many of them would respond to the call, turning into living sentinels to stand against the wave of enforcers that was sure to come. As the echoes of the ritual faded, the city seemed to groan in response. Distant sirens blended with the faint rumble of vehicles on highways. Myra lifted her head to see pale streaks of magical light flickering in and out of existence beyond the structure's open walls. The incantation had worked. From her vantage point, she could spot a cluster of newly animated traffic signs bounding down an off-ramp and converging on the nearest intersection. Speed limit signs hopped about, their slender poles tapping rhythmically on the roads. Yield signs joined them, forming triangular heads that bobbed like an eager crowd. All were drawn by the magical beacon Myra and Suzette had ignited. The reaction was exhilarating, yet a knot of worry coiled in Myra's stomach. The coven would sense this widespread enchantment. It was far too large to go undetected. Even now, robed shadows might be gathering on rooftops, preparing to strike back with lethal force. Myra took a trembling breath. Let them come, she thought, determination flaring in her chest. She hadn't started this rebellion for it to vanish at the first sign of danger. Their next move was to establish a protective barrier. Suzette crouched near a row of pillars, tracing protective wards that would prevent unwelcome teleportations or illusions from breaching their stronghold. Myra, meanwhile, rallied the newly arrived signs, encouraging them to stand watch at various entrances. The synergy was immediate. The signs seemed to communicate through subtle, metallic vibrations, forming squads that took post at every corner. Engines droned outside, and new sets of headlights illuminated the structure's interior, but no one approached just yet. Myra and Suzette felt the pulse of the city's awakened magic, surging through their veins, forging a tenuous but electrifying bond among all their guardians. Fire still burned in Myra's chest, but she felt steadier with Suzette by her side. Perhaps it was the synergy of like-minded witches, or simply the calm after the incantation. Either way, she had never been more ready for what was about to unfold. It happened just before dawn. A howling wind tore through the open walls of the parking structure, sending dust twisting into the air. An echoing chant, the hallmark of an organized coven strike, cascaded between the columns. At least half a dozen enforcers emerged, their silver-trimmed robes glinting in the half-light. They spread out, forming a semicircle around Myra, Suzette, and the ring of awakened traffic signs. Each enforcer radiated lethal, magical energy. Swirling orbs crackled around their hands. The High Matriarch stepped forward, unhooded, revealing stone-grey hair wound in intricate braids. Her cold eyes bored into Myra. "You dare disrupt the balance of our city," she hissed, voice echoing with arcane power. "You would turn the city's own infrastructure into a chaotic mockery of magic. Surrender now, child, or pay the price." Myra felt her heart hammering. But she didn't waver. She gave the matriarch a withering glare. "You forced me to do this. I'm not destroying the city. I'm giving it new life. If you truly cared about harmony, you'd stop hoarding magic for your own gain." The matriarch's lip curled in disgust. With a sharp gesture, she flung a bolt of dark energy directly at Myra. Instantly, 3 traffic signs, 2 yield signs, and a small do-enter lunged forward, intercepting the bolt in a dazzling explosion of sparks and twisted metal. Suzette countered with a scorching wave of her own aura, forcing the enforcers to shield themselves. The 2 groups clashed in a frenzy of chanting and flashing lights. On Myra's side, her growing legion of traffic sign guardians advanced, using their reflective surfaces to shield against blasts of arcane energy. Some forcibly knocked enforcers off their feet, metal edges clanging against staves and runic blades. On the coven's side, the enforcers conjured illusions of monstrous shapes, illusions that roared and snapped, hoping to intimidate or corral the living signs. But Myra's guardians, bolstered by the powerful incantation, remained steadfast. The battle raged. across the parking structure's levels. Chunks of concrete crumbled, wards flared and fizzled, and the awakened signs battered the enforcers over and over with relentless determination. Still, the High Matriarch's presence loomed, far mightier than the rest. She spat incantations in an ancient tongue, conjuring whips of shadow that tore through the air. They slashed at the metal guardians, slicing several in half. Myra gasped as she felt the severed connection to the destroyed signs, the abrupt loss of their living presence, a sharp pang in her chest. Suzette joined forces with Myra, channeling twin streams of emerald energy that wrapped around the matriarch. Yet the old witch laughed, eyes blazing, and shattered their spell with a single swipe of her staff. The force of the impact knocked Myra to her knees. She felt panic rising. Could they truly stand against the matriarch's centuries of practiced might? Despite the gloom, Myra remembered the central premise of the incantation that had awakened the signs. They were fused not only to her magic, but also to the city's essence. This was a place of countless dreams, heartbreaks, triumphs, and losses. Everyone who had passed a sign on a lonely road or navigated an intersection late at night had left a whisper of energy behind. She latched onto that intangible power. Struggling to her feet, she lifted the stolen tome and shouted words that quaked the air. The neon lights outside flickered. An enormous roar echoed through the underpass as more signs poured into the structure. Chevrons, merge arrows, roadwork warnings, a battered old route marker. They flooded in from every direction, unstoppable in their swirling metal dance. The matriarch unleashed another shadow whip, but the swirl of new guardians knocked it aside, brandishing their reflective surfaces like shields. Myra channeled the city's spirit, letting the swirl of traffic signs become a thundering wave. She heard the matriarch's rage echo in the concrete rafters. At last, the enforcers' line buckled under the unstoppable tide of metal guardians that pinned them, forcing them to kneel or retreat. Suzette locked eyes with Myra, giving a resolute nod. Together they invoked a binding incantation. Strands of glowing runes wove through the building, latching onto the enforcers, subduing their spells. The High Matriarch struggled violently, but even she could not break free from the combined will of the awakened city. Slowly but surely the magic expanded, forging a cage of radiant glyphs that neutralized the coven's defenses. Silence fell. Myra stepped forward, gaze riveted on the matriarch. "Escape if you can, but leave this city," she said quietly, voice hoarse from chanting. "Back away from its people and its roads. This is our home, and it's alive under our protection now." With a bitter scowl, the matriarch's eyes flared with defeated malice, but she made no retort. As the binding tightened, the coven enforcers collapsed under its weight, left powerless but alive. The first rays of dawn crept past the broken walls, illuminating the battered parking structure with a golden light. Myra collapsed onto her knees, panting in exhaustion. The guardians' metallic surfaces glimmered as though in triumph, but she could sense their fatigue as well. Suzette placed a reassuring hand on Myra's shoulder, helping her stand. A profound stillness pervaded the scene, the sense that a new chapter had opened in the city's hidden magical tapestry. "What's now?" Suzette whispered, eyes scanning the ranks of battered signs and the subdued enforcers. Myra looked at her with a tentative smile. As dawn's warmth filled the space, she believed for the first time in a future where magic could be shared rather than hoarded, where witches could build wonders rather than silencing them behind closed doors. "We give the city back to itself," Myra said quietly. The rebellious guardians would continue to exist, watchful but unobtrusive, a reminder that freedom was as simple and as profound as a sign commanding you to stop, to yield, or to go.